Welcome to part 2 of the full moon video in Gemini. So the full moon Gemini video. We're going to look at this full moon in the houses based on the ascendant. And there are a couple of things I need to tell you before I share my screen and show you the placements as well. There will be timestamps everywhere, so don't worry, fear not. You can go backwards, forwards, you can do whatever you want with it. Now, I just need to tell you a couple of things about this video. So one, I use I don't use whole house systems. I use equal house. I like to consider the degree of the ascendant, so I'm not going to use whole signs, and it doesn't speak to me as much. At least so far, it hasn't spoken to me as much. So that's one thing. So if you think that the planet should be somewhere else, or, make sure that you're not comparing to your result from whole house system. Number two is I do separate degrees as early degrees and late degrees. And in all of my videos, I do the same, but they change because the degrees of the full moons change. And so it will vary. So in the case of this video, the early degree will be only from 0 to 3, and the late degrees will be pretty much all of the rest. Will be like from 4 to 29 degrees of a sign. All right. So find out what degree is your ascendant, because that's going to make a difference. And a third thing that I wanted to say is, in particular for this full moon, I want to also say that there is a bit of a liminality as well. So from 3, 4, and 5 degrees, they are sort of in a liminal space. They're in between houses. So it doesn't really mean that it's an absolute, 8th house is 100% 8th house. It could be on a sort of an in-between, placement. And it's important to keep that in mind, especially if it's 4 degrees, which is the degree of the full moon. So that might be a sort of an in-between there, and it's important to consider maybe both houses. So you want to have a look at the 2 houses as well. Okay, so with all of that said, let me share my screen and let's talk about the full moon in the houses based on the ascendant. And this is all for you to make the most of it. Okay, I want to do these videos so you have, the more information you have, the more you can set intentions, and you can work with the energies. This is the goal. All right. So first, and first is always the first. 0 degrees Aries. So to start, we go for early degrees Aries as well as late degrees Pisces. So remember, early degrees 0 to 3 and late degrees 4 to 29. So early Aries and late Pisces we'll have this full moon happening in the 3rd house. So here's the sun in Sag. I've taken the moon away because it will move a lot faster as a move around to get the ascendants. So just as a matter of clarity, so it's still going to be in a 3rd house. So if I keep shifting here, we're going to see, I should have shifted backwards. So there we go. If we go backwards to Pisces, to late Pisces, you're going to see how the sun moves further and further into the 9th house. So that means that the moon is in the 3rd house. Now, with this full moon in the 3rd house, it's almost like a double whammy, isn't it? It's like a full moon in Gemini happening in the house of Gemini. So I think more than anyone else, it's important for you to keep an eye on what you're saying, how you're saying, pay attention to communication patterns, speaking things that you don't mean or that you regret later. It could be about changing ways that you think, changing ways that you communicate, that you share ideas as well. There is a sense of changing that this full moon is representing, but also, is emphasizing the Sagittarius and Gemini quality of this full moon because it's in its own house in this case. So any disputes of what's the truth and how you speak the truth, or how other people, potential arguments with siblings as well, that's the 3rd house. So just pay attention to all of that and watch part 1 as well, because in part 1, I'm addressing the whole chart of this full moon, which is obviously not just an isolated moon in Gemini and sun in Sag. There's, there are other things happening with Saturn in Pisces, and, there's more to this full moon. So it's important to claim that emotional maturity of the T-square with the Saturn in Pisces when it comes to how you communicate. Early Aries and late Pisces. And don't regret, don't be under the risk of regretting what you're going to be saying. This is definitely going to be activating your thoughts, your mind. It's a brilliant time for research, for getting in touch with information and for doing any spiritual, also psychic developments there, if that's something you want to do, you feel inclined and you enjoy it as well. All right. Now, for the late Aries and the early Taurus, we're going to have the full moon happening in the second house. So the second house will be everything that has to do with worth, self-worth, values, your own sort of resources as well, and how you make those resources, how you create those resources, etc. So there's something about that this full moon will be activating. There could be discussions about resources, there could be arguments about resources. Gemini and Sag are very argumentative potentially, and we know that Mars is going to be very much involved in this full moon. So Mars will be conjoined the sun, opposite the moon, square to Saturn. So there's a tension that this full moon is bringing. Okay, and so in your case, it might be a tension around resources, around how to increase resources, or an argument with other people as well about that. If people owe you money, or if you owe money to people, this might be under the spotlight during this full moon. But on a deeper level, really, is getting in touch with deeper layers of your own self-worth, of your own, or what's in between your self-worth as well. If you're giving your power away, if you're allowing other people, to take the reins of your life, and things like that, with the 8th house Mars. And so it's important to pay attention to these feelings, but they might be around that sort of topic, those topics. And so great time to release, relinquish, let go, of old habits in connection to resources and self-worth. And again, if you have seen my part 1 of this video, you already know that Venus is very important during this full moon. And so that's very relevant to you, late Aries, early Taurus, because Venus has a resonance with the second house as well. So there's something interesting there for you to think about and to mine meaning. Remember, astrology is mining meaning, is finding more meanings as you apply this to your personal situation, to your personal chart and whatnot. All right. But it will be in your second house. Now, for the late Taurus and the early Gemini, this full moon will be happening in the first house. And the closest your Gemini ascendant is to 4 degrees, then the closest this is going to be happening on your ascendant. So it will be really putting more emphasis on how you relate. And the full moon in the first house in Gemini is how you can change patterns or things that you can let go of in relation to your communication, moon in Gemini, how you express yourself, how you listen to others as well. Those could be like under the spotlight. It could be about work as well, because I know it's not in the 6th house, but because of Saturn forming a square to this moon and the sun, it could be with authority figures and how you don't listen to them, or you listen to them too much, or how you communicate with authority figures as well. How do you bargain? How do you say no or yes? Or, how do you assert your vision when you're in that sort of situation? But it could be love relationships as well, because after all, we're talking about the first house and the 7th as well. So how do you deal with other people? How do you express yourself verbally with other people? How do you make yourself heard and or not? Or how do you dominate conversations? Things like that. So it will definitely be picking up those areas there for you, early Gemini, late Taurus. Now, for the late Gemini and early Cancer rising, reminding you that in this video, early is 0 to 3, late is 4 to 29, with the mind that the between 3, 4, and 5, we're on a liminal space, and it will be interesting for you to consider both houses. All right, in that case, the early and the late one. So for the late Gemini, early Cancer rising, the full moon will be happening in the 12th. The full moon will be happening in the 12th, with the sun in the 6th, and Saturn potentially being in the 9th house as well of your chart. And that will be connected with service, right? But the moon falling in the 12th could be ideas that are coming back to you, compulsive thinking that might be coming back to you from family members, old family lineages, psychic emotions, psychic feelings, you know, any of these sort, because we're talking about the 12th house. So we're talking about the invisible, everything that's invisible that we can't quite see, that's there but not, vivid dreams, you know, insights that might be coming to you, and they might be connected to truths, or, you know, to something that it will be important for your worldview as well, if Saturn is in the 9th house as well. But there is something, check the Saturn video as well to see where Saturn is in your chart and what this might be meaning in terms of learning, because it will be so important during this full moon. So the full moon Gemini in the 12th is old patterns of behavior, especially connected with communication as well, and how you communicate. And that might be fights with co-workers, Sun and Mars in the 6th house, or something in your daily life that might push you into a 12th house situation of feeling a little more isolated, or isolated because you need as well. You know, when we have a 12th house situation or natal planets in the 12th, it's very important to have quality time alone. I keep saying that to my clients always. You need to be able to hear your own thoughts, which might be buried, you know, amongst other people's expectations from you and whatnot. So with the full moon falling in the 12th, you could be dealing with things like that. And it's a wonderful placement for meditation. It emphasizes more of that Mercury square Neptune that I talked about in the first video. So I'm going to put part 1 in the comments so you can have a look as well. All right. Now, for the late Cancer and the early Leo, so the late Cancer rising and the early Leo, we have the full moon in Gemini happening in the 11th house, with Saturn potentially being in the 8th house as well, as part of the T-square. And here the conflict is about our individual contribution within a group situation as well. And how much do we bring to the table? With the moon in the 11th, it could be communications on groups or group situations, you know, expectations from the group as well, ideas that you might be picking up from the group as well, and challenges around that that you might be facing with the full moon in Gemini in there. You could also be having insights about, you know, hopes for the future and things like that. But there might be a need to go into the 8th house and Saturn to do the healing, to become more serious about the healing as well, because of this conflict that the sun in opposition to the moon will be invoking or reflecting in your case. So there's something there. Again, have a look at the Pisces in the houses based on the ascendant, because you can recap what Saturn transit really means for you in the house, and how this full moon will be picking up on it or activating it. All right. Now, for the late Leo and the early Virgo, this transit, this full moon will be happening in the 10th house. And with the 10th house, again, we have a sense here of a career movement, of something, you know, that you need to let go, especially in terms of how you communicate, how you express yourself verbally. Are you considering your values with that Venus conjoined the South Node during the full moon? Are you taking them seriously enough in your career, in your work, in the role that you're playing in society, and how you express that with a partner, with someone else, with a business partner or an authority figure again, because Saturn will then be in your 7th house, you know, with others, in your relationship with others. The other, are they, you know, restricting you, Saturn, pushing you to be more mature, or, you know, whatever is happening? The full moon will be in the 10th. So it has to do with insights, developments, new thoughts, arguments in the area connected to career as well. And like I said on part 1, try not to get carried away by these thoughts and, you know, throw the whole thing out of the window. It's important to be aware, to be conscious of it. And if you have your ascendant close to 4 degrees Virgo, then this full moon is happening on your midheaven, like bam, bang on, closest to your midheaven as well, potentially. And that's very strongly telling us, you know, that there are changes. It's a time to change whatever it is that you're doing in your career, that you've been feeling you're ready to move on from, you're ready to change in some way, you're ready to upgrade in some way. This full moon is going to be activating it. Messages, writings, communication, you know, apply that Gemini flavor to it as well. All right. Now, for the late Virgo and the early Libra rising, we're going to have this full moon happening in the 8th house. So we've got an inversion here, isn't it? From the 3rd house that we read. So, hold on. I'm making confusion. Okay, so for the late Virgo and early Libra, this full moon is going to be happening in the 9th house. All right, it's not the 8th. I'm looking at the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. Never mind that. I'm using that for a talk I'm preparing. Anyhow, so with the full moon in the 3rd house, this is all about how you communicate your bigger ideas, your bigger perspective, your bigger point of view, your worldview, right? The 9th house is the worldview. We've got an inversion here of Gemini in the 9th and Sagittarius in the 3rd, which is, you know, shifting their natural houses there as well. So the full moon being in the 9th house, there's something there about your bigger perspective, your role in expanding your mind as well, that will be strongly activated. It could be connected with co-workers, because we've got Saturn in the 6th house then, and arguments with co-workers as well, potentially. Arguments with siblings as well, because we've got the 3rd house involved as well, and Gemini. But it could also be movement, travels, you know, because we have that moon in the 9th. Long trips, long travels. Have you been wanting to go on a journey for a long time? Are you on a journey for a long time now? You might have insights about that, about this area in your life. Something that you need to find out, to get in touch with somehow. All right. Now for the late Libra and the early Scorpio, this full moon will be happening in the 8th house. So the sun in Sag and Mars in the 2nd and the moon in the 8th. Now that is brilliant. I mean, whenever I think about Gemini in the 8th, I think about talking therapies. It's like being able to communicate the deeper wounds, the older wounds, you know, this process of psychological reintegration that I feel the 8th house represents. But it could also be connected with anything resourceful, in an investment, basically. Resources of others, isn't it? Like we say about the 8th house, but someone investing that in you, willing to invest that in you, or you communicating about that, you know, some ideas, something that you need investment for. But some clarity. The full moon brings clarity, and then some clarity around the matters of the 8th house. And it's important to be careful not to get into fights about these as well. All right. finding out about something that's 8th house related. But it could definitely be a healing experience as well. All right. Now for the late Pisces, the late Scorpio. I'm going a bit nuts here. Okay. So for the late Scorpio and the early Sag, we'll have the full moon happening in the 7th house, 4 degrees Gemini in the 7th. So this could be becoming more aware of others and other people's need to be heard as well, or something of the 7th house, something of a breakthrough, or of an insight, a new vision, or a new way of thinking, or new ideas, new ways of communicating that will be coming through other people. You might be the one that's feeling more irritable and more impatient with the Sun and Mars conjoined in your 1st house. And for you who has early Sag rising, then even more so, because that Sun will be right on your ascendant during the full moon, and the moon will be right on your descendant. So it definitely has something to do with changing the communication patterns with partners, with other people. It's time to step up on that, and change how you verbalize and listen to other people a bit more, especially if you've got the Sag rising, which is, not necessarily willing to hear it so much, Sagittarius. So there's a lesson on hearing, a lesson on asking questions, asking questions, not making assumptions. I think that's a great one there. And now for the late Sag and the early Capricorn, this full moon will be happening in the 6th house. So it's a brilliant time to let go of old behaviors, old daily habits that you don't want to keep doing, habits for your daily job as well, your daily routines that you're a bit, unsure of. This is a great time to become aware of and to let go of as well. And it could also be communications at work, again, because we've got the 6th house in the picture there, and potentially Saturn transitioning your 3rd house. So you're learning a lot about verbal communication. And so with the moon in the 6th, this might be triggered in a job situation. But yeah, there's something there to be reclaimed or let go of as well. And always use your values as a compass, as a way of guiding you and guiding the direction that you're going to be taking as well. I will be put part 2 in the comments so you can see, or part 1, this is part 2, part 1 of this video in the comments so you can see what the chart of the whole full moon looks like. All right. Now for the late Capricorn and the early Aquarius, this full moon will be happening in the 5th house. So the conflict, Sun Mars might be coming through groups of people and forcing you to, access something, verbalize something about your individuality, your individual creativity, your individual voice, creatively speaking as well, with the moon in Gemini in the 5th house. It could be something connected with children as well, letting go of perspectives around your children, how you treat them, how you deal with them. It could be arguments with your children as well that might be triggered, during this full moon. And again, it's important to be aware of the whole full moon chart and how all of that is placed in your chart, so you can see more clues. Remember, astrology is detective work, and we're really trying to do a bit of detective work and understand, more and more. If we add more details, we can have a deeper view of what's in front of us. So the 5th house will be something creative as well. So creative writing could work really well for you here with the 5th house, dealing with your self-worth, but in a creative way as well, So there's something of that 5th house there with the full moon falling there for you, late Capricorn and early Aquarius. Now for the late Aquarius and the early Pisces, we're gonna have this full moon happening in the 4th house. And with the 4th house, it could be conflicts with the family, conflicts at home, you know, arguments at home, something that needs to change at home in a home situation, with someone that you're living with a family member, or something in where you go to rest, you know, your restful place that needs to be rejiggled. And having Saturn potentially in your 1st house, you need to be firm about who you are, what your beliefs are, and etc. You know, with Saturn in the 1st house. And that's something that's being taught about that there, you know, holding your values more, you know, a little closer to your heart and being able to express that, excuse me, in your home situation. So the full moon in Gemini, and the closer you are to the, you know, 4th degree Pisces ascendant, then the closest this full moon will be to your IC. So this is going to be even, you know, potentially depending on, you know, house system and how you calculate your midheaven and your IC. But if you do have an IC at 4 Gemini, then it will be really right there. And it will be even more urgent, these issues about house, home, housing, you know, etc. This is going to be very relevant during this full moon, and try to avoid unnecessary arguments. I think this is my advice to anyone, any house, any, you know, ascendant, really. All right. And then the late Pisces we already talked about in the beginning of the video, which would be the full moon in the 3rd house. All right, that's it. I hope this is helpful. Let me know in the comments what, you know, what house is this full moon going to be falling? Is it activating anything in your chart? Do you feel these energies already? Do you feel the build up already? Like, what's going on, and what are your plans? You know, now that you know, what are you going to be doing? Not to forget, I will be linking part 1 of this video here, and my video about Saturn in the houses as well, based on the ascendant, because the more you know, the more you can add information into the picture. All right. I'm wishing you all a wonderful, empowering, beautiful full moon, and I'll be seeing you all next Friday. All right. Take care now. Bye-bye.